Hello and welcome to today's edition of Extraordinary Outcomes. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of Pitchling, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Today we bring you the fourth installment of the 8-part limited series, Fixing the 5% Problem in B2B Sales. We are bringing you engaging discussions with experts from around the world on the elephant in the sales room, the abysmally low rate of conversion in B2B sales. Today we speak with Deb Calvert, founder of the Sales Experts channel and president of People First Productivity Solutions, Steve Hall, managing director of Executive Sales Coaching Australia, and John Moore, vice president of Revenue Enablement and Value Creator at Big Tin Can. First, my conversation is with Deb Calvert. Deb authored Discover Questions and Stop Selling and Start Leading, founded the Sales Experts channel, is president of People First Productivity Solutions, and is a certified sales and executive coach. She is one of the 65 most influential women in business, a top 30 global sales guru, and an inductee into the Sales Hall of Fame. Deb, welcome to the show. I'm looking forward to a very stimulating discussion today.
Every time we talk, I also have so many ideas that come from our conversations, and I've really enjoyed all these opportunities.
Thank you so much. So the reason we started this series is because I thought we are too entrenched in the way we sell. And this is purely a seller side perspective. I'm not talking about the buyer here at all. I'm saying that the way we are selling is not keeping pace, and the result is this elephant in the room, which is an abysmally low conversion rate from lead to close. And I have a very simple question to you, Deb. What got us here?
Oh, so many different things. And so let me offer a few ideas about that. One of them is that we've been measuring the wrong things. And when you're measuring, for example, number of calls, you're incentivizing the wrong behavior. You are causing people to only value the number of conversations, not the effectiveness of those conversations. So the metrics and what we value in selling, we've lost sight as we've had new tools and we've had new opportunities and we've had new enablements. We have lost sight of what really, really matters, and that is ultimately helping the buyer, which is a conversion. I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is that we misunderstand from the buyer's perspective what's really happening in our conversations with them. And if you'll allow me to take a tangent here, I think this is significant. Right now, in the past year, we have all been experiencing more and more information overload, infobesity. Right? It just is so much that we can't deal with it, and it's no longer healthy. And yet, because we are in front of our computers, because we aren't traveling, because we aren't socializing, we put a pressure even on ourselves to take in more and more information. The problem is, nobody can really do that. Cognitive overload is real. Now, what does this have to do with selling? Well, your buyers are experiencing the very same thing. Too much information, too much conflicting information, and no one helping them make sense of all that information. So I'm very, very interested in the research being done by Gartner around sense making in selling. Not being a teller, not being a giver of information, but being the person who helps the buyer sort out all the information methodically, slowly, in a way that truly adds value. And that leads to more conversions. But sales managers, sales directors, VPs, they hear a certain story from a vendor. Let's say it's the latest, greatest new technology or enablement. And that company, self-serving, because we all are, right? But they say you should measure this, and then you can get this. And then they hyper focus on that one thing based on the promise of the big investment that they made. without thinking about the implications and the unintended consequences on the overall relationships, brand, and sales effectiveness that they're going to have. I think the other driver is, in many places, desperation. Sales numbers aren't where they used to be. Quotas are more and more difficult to reach. We see every year lower numbers of salespeople actually reaching their quotas. And so that desperation promotes the hyperfocus, promotes the wrong attention. It puts results above the right way to get results. You think short term instead of long term, and you lose.
Quick clarification, not clarification, but quick question here. Do you see the behavior on this quota? Because I want to come back to this quota thing, because I think this is something we need to talk about. Do you see a behavioral difference between the listed companies and non-listed companies? Is it that because you have to do this investor calls every quarter, you are more focused on the quarterly numbers vis-a-vis those who are not? Is there a difference, or is it like across the board?
I think there is some across the board, but I absolutely do see more of that sort of desperate short-term thinking in companies that have to produce reports, and especially any of those who have now a focus on selling themselves or meeting the VC needs or something else. The more of those pressures there are on short-term performance, the less building there is for long-term sustainable interactions with customers, and it does take away from the spirit of what you're trying to do and the results that you can get long term. We are so driven societally to look at the short term, and sales has always been about short term anyway. You've got your quota this month or this quarter, and now it cycles. Well, what have you done for me lately is all that we look at. And the even companies with long-term sales cycles, the products they sell require a longer-term sales cycle. Even there's a pressure, and I think it's a bit of an artificial pressure for that short-term performance. So buyers, they may not fully understand who owns, who influences, who affects what's happening in sales, but they sense it from the seller in that desperation. And so I think that there's even some resistance on the part of buyers, and it's a negative effect for the brand of a company long term. Now, most sales leaders will tell you that they've got the formula and they've figured out the way. But where I dispute that is that if that's true, right, they say when you really, really know something, you should be able to explain it to a 5-year-old, but they can't even explain it to their own sellers. And so it feels to salespeople like it's arbitrary. I've been paying a lot of attention lately to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in sellers. And the ones who come in and really want to help their buyers, and they have a thought that selling is going to help them, feel good about the work that they do, and then they start getting commission pressures and incentives, extrinsic motivation, it takes away from the intrinsic. And I think that we sometimes diminish the motivation, not really increase the motivation of salespeople.
Let's move on, Deb. So the next part of this conversation is, how do we fix it?
I think that you're absolutely right that something needs to change. Perhaps it's that we pay salespeople differently, the way that others are paid. Perhaps it's that we incentivize the right way, not just the right results, and that we have clear penalties when people are dishonest in selling. This fragmentation also forces us to bucket customers, our buyers, and then we treat them differently as opposed to having just human-to-human relationships with them. So this one's a MQL, and this one is a hot target. And, we have all these different buckets that we put them into. Just common sense tells you, if I'm the one who helps you make sense of something, I make it personal, I make it meaningful, I make it relevant, and I make it make sense. So I'm asking you the questions where you get self-discovery. Well, I am the one you are more likely to now trust, and accept advice from and to rely on in a way that we've always imagined consultative selling and trusted advisor status would bring us. So I think more attention to sense making and stripping out excess information is extremely important. That may mean sacrificing quantity for quality. I think where SDRs often miss the mark is that they are so quantity focused that they lose all personalization. And I do think personalization still matters. They may not be having the conversations where they make sense out of something for the buyer, but they should be having the conversations where they make something personal and interesting for the buyer. SDRs need to work more on being interested and being seen as interested than in trying to spew something that will be interesting and hopefully hook one or two buyers into an appointment. Buyers want two-way dialogue. They want to be understood, and they want to have someone helping them sort out all the options. Someone they can trust, someone who isn't going to be rushed, someone who doesn't treat them like they're one of a million, but one of a kind. We, inside our own organizations, need to be having conversations about getting the right results the right way and supporting sellers for both. Actions drive results. So what are the actions that demonstrate the way we want to do business? Putting the customer first, not just saying that, but really doing that. And then we have to come down. We have to peel that onion back even more. Results come from actions. Actions come from beliefs. Why do you believe it's the right thing to get to know a customer and to spend time really nurturing that relationship? If you believe instead that you have to make short-term sales because that's what you hear every single morning in the rally that's happening inside your organization, in the pressure that you're getting, right? That belief fuels different actions and it will get different results. So we've got to create experiences that shape beliefs that get us the right results the right way, the way we've defined it for our brand and for those conversions, thinking long-term, because that's really the only way that buyers are going to think. We can't keep doing the same thing. It's not working. And we all know it. Like you said, this is an elephant in the room. So let's get after it instead.
Deb, thank you so much.
Thank you, Subhanjan.
Meet Steve Hall, MD of Executive Sales Coaching Australia and known as Australia's leading authority on C-level sales. He has sold products and services worth over 100 million to senior executives in 23 countries. Steve is a founding member of Sales Masterminds APAC, and Top Sales magazine named him their 50 best keynote speakers in 2020. As a devil's advocate, Steve keeps it real and asks hard questions that get results. He lives in Sydney with his wife, Susan. Steve, welcome to this section in Extraordinary Outcomes, the show we run on the Sales Experts channel, where we are trying to address what we believe is the elephant in the room, and sales professionals are not really talking enough about it, and that's the 5% conversion problem in B2B sales, and which is pretty much abysmal. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it's certainly a problem. I think the issue is not so much that we're not converting enough deals. I think it's we're going for too many deals or going for the wrong deals. I think that's the core issue, is that we are not defining the deals that we go for well enough. We're not qualifying well enough. And because a lot of salespeople in B2B particularly are on quarterly targets, they perhaps do or don't do their own prospecting, but if they do their own prospecting, they may be over optimistic about the possibilities. And if they have prospects given to them, then potentially the people that are compensated on finding leads are compensated to find leads that aren't as suitable as they could be. So I think the nub of the problem is that we should be getting a much higher close rate and a much lower number of deals.
Why do you think we have landed here?
Well, as I said, there's a couple of reasons. Let's look at the SDR model for a moment, where someone who is not who is a less experienced salesperson is perhaps compensated for the number of leads that they get, or that's targeted with making a certain number of calls a day, and every meeting they schedule is a success. I mean, that particular model rewards quantity over quality. So, and one issue you certainly get is an issue where sales and marketing argue, and marketing says to sales, well, you don't follow our leads up quickly enough, and sales says that's because they're rubbish leads, and often they are rubbish leads. So I think one issue is the non-alignment of targets of sales and marketing in a situation where the salespeople don't do their own prospecting. And where salespeople do their own prospecting, first of all, you've got the boom and bust cycle. Oh gosh, our pipeline's empty. We'd better go out and do a blitz and do lots of prospecting. Then you get one or two or three deals, and you've got to do proposals and demonstrations and negotiations and all the other things that you do in sales. And then all of a sudden you put your head up and you've got an empty pipeline again. So I think the basic problem is a lack of an intelligent, aligned prospecting, selling system where the right people do the right work at the right time. And I'm particularly thinking of an instance where, supposing you're selling to something that is high value, let's say $500,000 upwards. And when you're selling that to an organization, the person that makes the ultimate decision as to whether to buy or not necessarily the people that do the day-to-day stuff, but the one that signs the checks and ticks it, is a senior executive. If you're trying to get the original meeting with them, to get in front of them, to talk to them about their issues and what they sell, and the person that's doing that is a 25-year-old trainee salesperson with no business expertise, it's very difficult for them to have an intelligent conversation at that person's level, particularly if that person is getting calls from 155 other 25-year-old SDRs who've got no expertise. A lot of leads generated by marketing are done via LinkedIn, via emails, via search engine optimization, etc. And by their very nature, those leads are lower down the corporate totem pole, because senior executives don't spend their time Googling for pieces of software or reading emails or doing those things. So the very nature of the way that you generate leads dictates the level of those leads. And if a lead is generated with a deputy IT manager, but the final decision's made by the CIO or by the managing director, you've got that problem of dealing at very low levels and then trying to get to high levels. And I think a lot of salespeople are under pressure to have a full pipeline based upon it's upside down logic. The logic is, okay, we only close 5%. We need to make $5 million. Therefore, we need 20 times $5 million in our pipeline to make sure we make our targets.
Yes.
And that means that there's all this pressure to fill the pipeline, which leads to a pipeline full of rubbish, which leads to the 5% qualification. So it's a circular argument. Yes. Whereas the argument should be, okay, we need to make $5 million. Let's find 10 leads or 5 leads that will and we'll close 20% of them, and we'll make our target. So people are scared to clear out their pipeline because their management demands to have this full pipeline, and so they spend a large proportion of their time chasing deals they're never going to win in a million years.
Absolutely, which means also a huge amount of loss in productivity, right? If you're spending your time doing that, you're not doing the other thing, which is to sell.
Exactly.
I'll come back to this, but I want to dig a little more on how you think great leads can be generated.
So my philosophy is that you're better off targeting a narrower but more higher quality group of potential customers by having a very clearly defined ideal customer profile, approaching them and meeting them at the right level earlier on. And yeah, sure, that maybe you're meeting them and they haven't got a lead. They're not ready yet, but they may be ready in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or a year. And if you're talking to them until they are ready, then when they are ready, they know you and you know them. But the
Right.
problem is we all want hot leads now. I did some work for one of the largest software companies in the world, and they wanted to focus on finance companies in Australia and said, "Can you get us meetings at executive level?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I can." So we got them a heap of meetings, but they stopped after 6 months because they said, "We're not getting any hot leads." And I said, "Well, you're not looking for hot leads. You're looking to build relationships at executive level." So that's another of the problems. We're all impatient, and we're not. And because another problem. God, there's so many problems. Another problem is the high turnover of salespeople. This guy's not making their numbers. They've failed to make their numbers. Or this person hasn't made their numbers for 3 quarters on the trot. We better get rid of them and bring in another one and another one. I mean, imagine if you did that with a football player.
Exactly.
I mean, Liverpool and Real Madrid identify potential stars when they're 9 years old, and and 1 in 50 of them. I haven't thought of this analogy before. It's a good one. 1 in 50 of them gets to make the first team 10 years later, and 1 in 200 of them becomes a superstar. But they don't go out. I mean, some of them do say, "Okay, we need a goal scorer. We need a hot goal scorer that can stick the ball in their net right now." And sure, they can get one of those, but it costs them $200 million. I think that when you get what you pay for, and if you pay people to close deals, they will try their best to close deals. And if you pay people to generate leads, they will generate as many as they can. And it also encourages people focusing on their own individual goals rather than working as a team. So if you're paid to generate leads and someone says to you, "Can you do some research for me?" "Oh no, I don't get paid to do that." So I'm quite a big believer in having people do what they're good at, and not only what they're good at, but what they enjoy doing.
Yes.
One of the challenges we have is we say to people, "You must prospect, and some people hate prospecting. So you say, "Okay, if you hate prospecting, that's okay, but you must prospect, so make yourself do it." Get people who are intelligent, well targeted, and well trained, and who enjoy doing it, to research your customers. First of all, it's a strategic decision. What is our ideal customer profile? How big are they? What geography are they in? What industries are they in? What characteristics do they have? Once you've got that, the next question is, okay, which companies, physical companies, fit that profile? How many are there in my region? So maybe your ideal customer profile says with this and this industry and this size. Okay, how many companies are there? Now, what most people do, they go out and buy a list, but lists are rubbish. So get the people doing the research to research and say, "Okay, I've done my research, and these are the companies that fit that profile. These are the specific executives or people we want to get to, because that requires research too." And then when you go to the next stage, the people that are doing the outbound calling as opposed to the inbound calling. Let's look at both. You want to go to them, and you want them to come to you. So if you know who those companies are, you know who to go to. If you know who these companies are and you get a lead and they come to you, you say to them, "Oh, we've got someone that's inquired on our website. Let's look and see if they're on our list of ideal customers." Oh, they're not. So they're a junior programmer in a company in an industry we don't service, in a company that does 3 and 6 months a week, So we'll be polite and answer them, but we should say, "Oh, look, I'm terribly sorry. We're not your thing." If a relatively junior person does research and calls you and says, "Oh, I want more information," you don't go back and try and get to the company through them. You go to the top and say, "Oh, I hear you're looking it up," and you work your way down. And if you want hot leads in June of 2022, you should be talking to senior executives today. Someone, and that could be different people, needs to do the research. Okay, I want to get into this company. They're this type of company. This is what I sell. These are the business problems I can solve. Let me look at that company in a bit more detail. What does their annual report say? What do they say on the website? What do we know about them through our research? Who is likely to have the type of problem I can solve? And let's talk to them about that problem. And if we can solve 10 problems, we can go to them and say, "Hi, I'd like to talk to you about solving problem X." "Oh no, we don't have problem X." "Okay, great." You go back 2 weeks later. "How about I talk to you about solving problem Y?" So rather than trying to flog your stuff, you'll try to help them solve problems. And the people that do that need to, at least as a minimum, be able to talk intelligently about that problem.
Sure.
And then maybe they're the account executives, or maybe you hand over. But when you hand over, it's an intelligent handover. So that's a model that I prefer much more than the existing ones.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you very much for your quite incisive questions that drew me out a bit.
Thank you. And finally, John Moore, the collaborator, partners with Big Tin Can to test and refine best practices, meets with practitioners, analysts, and thought leaders, and is focused on increasing the level of adoption of enablement best practices, processes, and tools across the globe. John, welcome to Extraordinary Outcomes and the special segment that we are running on fixing the 5% conversion problem. I'm delighted to have you here. I've been looking forward to our conversation, and welcome. I'm so happy to have you here.
Oh no, it's an honor to be here, totally, and it's such an important problem to talk about. So I'm personally excited to have a chance to.
So, John, let's dive right in. There is this elephant in the room. B2B sales conversion is a low single digit. You slice it and dice it any which way you want. The fact is we are not converting.
I agree.
Why are we there, and how did we reach here, John?
For the longest time, and even today, we live in a world where we think we're far better off just throwing a huge fishing net out there and identifying everybody under the sun who may ever want to talk to us. So you still see marketing teams living by the idea of, a marketing qualified lead, where it's basically anybody with a pulse that ever comes to your website, let's get them to sign up for a lead form and call them. And first off, we do such a terrible job as a global go-to-market community of really recognizing and better refining who we should be talking to. And I don't mean simply by they have a pulse, they're a CMO or anything like that. I mean, do they really have the pain that we can help them solve? Do they really have an urgent need and a problem that they need to solve? And do they have budget? We all know these basic principles of, having success, selling, solving problems, however we want to phrase it. But we still go after the idea and the concept of, I need 10,000 MQLs this quarter. And sales basically gets this huge set of leads from marketing, and they don't know what to do with it, so they don't know who to call. So they either call everybody and fail miserably and get dejected and horrified, and they don't trust marketing, or they call no one, which too often I see happen too. The other side of that equation, though, is even when we give the sales team the right set of leads to talk to, the right people to talk to, we've done a traditionally poor job of educating sales, of training sales, of cooperating with sales on how to most effectively identify the problems and move the right people through the funnel. And a lot of times, even if sales is only working 20 or 30 leads at a time, depending on the, a B2B, the size of those deals and how long they take, what ends up happening is they're trying to work all 25 to 30 of those leads at the same level of prioritization without enough understanding of who's really got the pain, who's really most likely to move forward today, who can I most benefit now. So there's also that lack of understanding of prioritization and how to work with the right clients at the right time. We're focused on talking to our board of directors every month or every quarter, and they're demanding numbers. Our shareholders, if we're a public company, they're demanding numbers, and we hit certain targets. Hey, this quarter you're going to close $2 million or whatever the number is. So in their head, right from the outset, they're scrambling to figure out what they can shove into that pipeline to hit that artificially created number. In order to get to a much more predictable model, And I think it's doable, I think it's achievable, but I'm not sure that many companies will have the appetite to do it. You really need to flip the model entirely on its head. You need to start educating sales leaders on how to identify the proper sets of leads and forecast against that proper sets of leads, that proper set of leads and opportunities. And if you can teach them to do that, they can actually prepare for you a real forecast that tells you what you can actually achieve. The vast majority of sales leaders, the vast majority of revenue leaders simply don't understand the mechanics of their business well enough to know what's a valid target. So what do they end up doing? They simply say, add 10% to the last quarter. We achieve that by raising the prices of our products by 5%. We achieve that by demanding that our sellers go out there and find a way to cross-sell and upsell additional components. So customers are left feeling more often than not that sales isn't listening to them, that sales is simply coming to them with an agenda, because they are. The typical sales manager was simply a great seller, right? They knew how to close a deal. So the typical sales leader today is still somebody who is really good at closing business. And they come in, they are not taught how to be a great sales leader, how to amplify themselves by training and coaching their teams, where they could start to see the scale being met, as scaling themselves out by training and coaching their team. Instead, we also accept as an industry, as a community, as a profession, that 50% of our sellers are never going to hit quota. So we do two things. We promote people that are good sellers and we don't teach them to be managers. And we accept failure as just a fact of life in how we operate. We accept that 5% is good enough. We accept that 50% of people hitting quota is good enough. We accept that 33% of people are going to turn over and leave the group every year. How do we educate ourselves to be better problem solvers? How do we educate ourselves to be better communicators and collaborators, so when we sit down with customers, we can really ascertain and understand, is this an opportunity we can help with? And if it's not, stop trying to sell them something they don't need. Move on to the next customer. We're all talking about business intelligence. We're all talking about data-driven insight. But none of us, or few of us, actually understand, A, how to interpret the data we have today, much less do we have systems that are interpreting it for us to give us some basic assumptions to work from. We've been talking about machine learning and artificial intelligence for years. But the reality is computing power hasn't really reached the point until recently where it can actually start to process all that data and come out with some meaningful insights. We still operate, though, as businesses on technology that we've used for thousands of years. And what I mean by that is the earliest of bookkeepers back in Egypt basically had on their board checklist. We modeled that. I started my career in Lotus Development, Lotus 123. We modeled spreadsheets off of that very same model that was initially converted into books. And we still operate by giving people CSV reports. We still operate by giving people HTML reports, which are nothing more than columns. We haven't taken the step yet. Not enough people, not enough businesses have taken the step yet to say, what can I extract from that data to provide to you as an insight on what to actually do next? So instead of giving you a CSV file that makes you as a seller pour through thousands of rows to figure out who to call, why don't we just tell you who to call?
What do you prescribe? What is your prescription to that?
I mean, we all understand that when you go to sell some complex piece of B2B software to someone, maybe you're talking to the buyer, maybe you're talking to a champion, maybe you're talking to one of the decision makers. While they may or may not agree on the problem that you're trying to solve for their business, they also have distinctly different problems that they're hoping for you to solve that are separate from that big line item that they're paying for. They have political motivations, they have personal motivations, they have goals that they're getting bonused upon, that are different from this one. And in fact, oftentimes they're competing priorities. So understanding that the buyer's in charge and that all of these buyers are in charge, it's not just one person, that's an overwhelming and mind-blowing thing for people to start to embrace. And that small group of people and companies that are embracing it are going to help us all get there. Some of the stuff we're doing in our business that I think are smart moves forward. We're accepting that it's not a quantity game, that the game is not about getting 10,000 leads thrown at the sellers. We're recognizing that businesses need to do a much better job of identifying the customers, the prospects that are in market, that have a need we can solve, and having conversations with those people, not the entire world. So first off, I think you need to recognize that that's a fundamental piece of the equation. The other piece of it that I think is so critical for businesses to look at, and I know I live and breathe in this world, is how do we better educate, train, and change the mindsets of our sellers to recognize that they can't wrestle control from the seller, or from the buyer, and find ways to cooperate with those people to custom tailor solutions that meet their needs within confines of what you can do, and seek to recognize across that entire buying group and that entire buying committee, both pre-sale and also post-sale, what all those dynamics are, and make sure that you're looking to satisfy each and every decision maker's needs, as well as the businesses along the journey. And I think the more you educate not simply the sales teams, but your customer success teams, your support teams, your marketing teams, on how to think and respect that, the better you're going to be able to move past that 5% number, which is terrible and unacceptable, to something much better. But I know I jumped right to the prescription, which is you asked me. I also think fundamentally before that, Supanjan, we have to say to ourselves, which is your point exactly that I loved right from the beginning, 5% is not good enough. We have to say that to ourselves. That's the number, and it's not good enough.
John, thank you so much. I really, really thank you for coming on the show. Thank you.
No, thank you, my friend.
Next week, tune in to hear George Brunton, founder of Membrane, Art From, founder Team Sales Development Incorporated, and Amy Franco, founder and CEO of Amy Franco Associates, to figure out what they're thinking about this elephant in the sales room.
It's easy to believe or draw the conclusion and make the assumption that salespeople are somehow born, right? They're people that were born with a certain trait. We think of them as, super extroverted, very social, go-getters that won't take no for an answer. And that's just a very sad or an old school thinking when it comes to selling. But if you have that assumption that that's how it is, well, you won't be spending any time and effort and money on developing salespeople.
Think about the Fuller Brush salesperson as we had in the US. This is a person that went door to door and had a pack full of things that were commonly needed and would show up and say, do you want one of these? Do you want one of these? Do you want one of these? And they had to go to house after house after house after house. And at the end of the day, if they did maybe 10 sales visiting, 100, 150 houses, they were happy with that. Again, the problem with that, it just leads now to buyer fatigue, salesperson fatigue, and a tremendous, misappropriation of resources and frustration.
We could probably categorize it into two big reasons why. There are the strategic reasons why and the tactical reasons why. I see the strategic reasons why as too much turnover in sales leadership roles. I also see it as the highest levels of leadership in an organization maybe not having a clear enough understanding of sales and the importance of sales in the organization. There was just a recent piece in Harvard Business Review to that point right there. And you have a sales culture problem. Organizations either don't have a sales culture or they're building the wrong sales culture.
I'm looking forward to hearing from you. What do you think about this 5% conversion problem in B2B sales? Please use the link below to record your views in video, and we will start incorporating them into the show in the upcoming episodes, as well as make it part of the full-length series. Time to wrap up for today. Remember, you will soon have access to the full interviews and transcripts. Keep an eye out for the link in the EXO newsletter. And thank you for watching. Until next time, stay well and craft extraordinary outcomes.